Darkseid is no more. And now the ancient gods have set their eyes upon New Genesis and the new gods. The great being floated through the dark vastness of the universe. She had long since died out, and having kissed her favorite star goodbye, allowed her end to bloom. Now, she floats before the cosmic space known as the Source Wall. But she is not alone, for Metron sits upon the Mobius chair before the wall that separates the vast unknowable. Light beams into him, and he receives a prophecy, a warning of the end. New Genesis, home to the new gods. The High Father stands upon a platform, his shepherd's staff in hand, and looks out into the darkness of the universe. But sadness has come upon him. There was a time I could stand here and look upon the countless worlds littered before dawn. I knew all their names, and now I am left with only a few. Is there a sadder sight than a fractured sky? The High Father asks Akala, his trusted guard. But Metron has arrived. You feel it, don't you, Isaiah? The God of Knowledge asks, daring to use the High Father's true name. Perhaps you mourn him more than you'd like, Metron points out. The High Father turns to the God of Knowledge. Your tongue has lost none of its venom, Metron Doomcrow. And in these halls, you will yet call me High Father, High Father tells him. Metron pauses for a moment and bows. When he looks up again, he warns the High Father of the prophecy he has been given by the Source Wall. Darkseid is dead. The forces of balance that held all of creation have fallen from their precarious dance. Now approaches a new hand of darkness. Now comes decimation, he explains. Warning of a child on Earth who shall be awakened as a new god. And all that we hold to be true shall be changed, Metron warns. High Father regards him for a moment as Metron turns to return to his chair. What would you have me do? High Father questions. Metron pauses and turns back. His shoulders give the slightest shrug. Mine is to prophesize. I am but a Doomcrow after all. Yours is the hand that holds the shepherd's staff, wise High Father. What will you do, I wonder? Metron says as he sits. In a flash of light, the God of Knowledge disappears. A moment passes as the High Father stands quietly and ponders. Akala, where is my champion? High Father finally asks. Shortly, the High Father stands in his throne room as the great doors open to reveal Lightray. I have come, High Father. What would you have me do? The hero asks as he crosses the throne room and bows before the King of the Gods. High Father smiles down at the hero before placing a hand on his head. Not you, child. Not for this task, High Father says before turning away. Where is Orion? He asks softly. Meanwhile, across the universe on Uxtram 6, the warrior known as Orion fights against a horde of young parademons in the depths of an alien mining facility. The creatures hiss as they leap at Orion from the shadows. Worms! You've nothing to do with yourselves now that your lord is gone, so you come crawling out of the dark! The warrior bellows. He whirls and throws one of the monsters away as he slams his fist into the gathering crowd. He is dead, and I am your reckoning! The battle ends in moments, and the last of the parademons fall. Finally, Orion stands in victory. Orion! A voice calls out. The warrior stops and answers the call, hearing the voice of the High Father speaking to him. Orion, my son, my warbringer, the hound at the throat of our enemies. I have a task for you, son. One that you must undertake without question. High Father tells him. Orion doesn't hesitate. Yes, High Father. What would you have me do? He asks. Later, in Glendale, California, Scott Free stares down in shock at his baby daughter. urine dripping down his hands and t-shirt as she cries before him. His eyes widen as he looks away in disbelief. Barda, the baby pooped, and I was changing her, but then she peed herself, and she got some on me, and I think she's got some on her, Scott calls. But Barda is asleep on the couch, snoring away, unaware of the visitor that is boom-tubed into their home. Scott is able to take a moment after putting his daughter to bed and making sure that Barda is sleeping comfortably on the couch. He heads outside with a sigh of relief and sits on a bench in the park across the street. Thank you for waiting, and for not waking the baby, Scott says to Orion without opening his eyes. The warrior sits next to him on the bench and removes his helmet. Hello, Scott. I know it has been a while since we last saw each other, but I'm here because Metron has made a prophecy, Orion explains. He warns Scott that a new god shall be awakened on Earth, and I, champion of New Genesis, have been tasked to kill him, Orion warns, staring up into the night sky. Scott sits up sharply, shocked at his friend's words. I know, Scott. Something is wrong. The High Father has not been himself, Orion says, and he looks at Scott. I have never, not once in my life, disobeyed the High Father. This is why I had to come to you, Orion says. He reaches out and puts a hand on Scott's shoulder. You are Mr. Miracle, the only one I would trust to escape me. You will take this child before I can find him, and you will run, Orion instructs. But Scott shakes his head, explaining that he is alive here now, that he and Barda have a daughter. I've had to escape my circumstances since I could breathe. I don't want to escape this, Scott snaps. But Orion shakes his head. For a brief moment, the visage of his handsome features fall away, revealing how much he looks like Darkseid, his true father. Look at me, Scot-free. High Father has set this task before me. He knows the son of Darkseid will follow his command. I will kill this child if I find him, Orion says. He stands and puts back on his helmet, warning Scott not to allow this to happen. 7 days. I give you 7 days, Orion says softly as he walks away. Meanwhile, in India, a husband rushes through the forest, his wife by his side and son in his arms. Keep running, Mira! Don't look back! We're almost there! He calls. But a group of mercenaries are close on their heels. The family breaks through the forest and sees a train coming on nearby tracks. There! The trains always slow down by the bend. If we can climb on, we can make it! The husband shouts. But they don't know that they are already in a sniper's crosshairs. Found them. I have them in my sights, Mr. Lord, the sniper says over the radio. I want the kid. Aside from that, you're clear to take the shot, Lord orders. The sniper doesn't hesitate and fires. The round hits the husband in the leg and brings him down. Run! Take Kamal and head for the tracks! The man shouts to his wife, but the mercenaries have arrived, surrounding them. The baby Kamal calls out for his father, and something happens. Light bathes the clearing as the boy begins to glow and rise up into the air. In the dwindling hour shall come hence the last avatar made. The great steed shall ride, and on its hooves shall follow the reckoning of all. And the new gods were born. The child has been reborn. A new god has arrived. The Machinotram, a vast mechanical planet, moves through the darkness of space. On board, Karac sits upon his throne, attended by his slaves as they adorn him with his weapons and armor. He has had many names throughout his conquest. Karac Deathspeaker, Karac Curseborn, to name a few. But Karac has always thought of himself as a scavenger. The parasite in his veins longs for the blood of the Sourceborn, those that some call gods. He stands and his servants step back. Karac stalks forward into the arena, The cheers of his followers fill the vast chamber. Before him stands an Estatrix, a creature that feeds on the very dust of creation. It is not Sourceborn, but it will do for now. Karac leaps forward with a bellow of rage, swinging his massive sword downwards. The fight is over in seconds. Blood spills and soaks into the floor of the arena as the crowd cheers. He has ordered his scouts to find the Sourceborn, those that some in the universe call the New Gods. Meanwhile, New Genesis shakes and crumbles. Great statues crack and the shining cities fall. The great castles burn and Highfather walks through them all, unable to save his world. Highfather suddenly sits up sharply in bed, awakening with a gasp and letting out a terrified scream. But his guard is there, wrapping massive arms around the ruler. Highfather, it is only a dream. All is well and calm. Akala is here. You are safe, Akala whispers. Back on Earth, scot-free stares at himself in the bathroom mirror before pulling on his mask. He moves through the house quietly, placing his letter on the nightstand before taking one final look at Barda, his loving wife, who has passed out in the bed, exhausted from being a mother and a hero. He closes the bedroom door and moves to the baby's room. Liv Free is asleep in her crib, and Scott leans down and kisses her softly on the forehead. He doesn't want to leave his family, but he knows that he must. That he must protect this child that the Highfather has ordered Orion to kill. Scott stops in the living room. He sighs gently as he is about to leave, but wants to take one final look at the home that he and Barda have made. He turns, but his eyes widen in surprise. The f***ing nerve of you, Scot-Free, Big Barda snaps. She stands there in full armor, Liv cradled in her arms, with a look of anger on her face. Now, Barda, it's not what it looks like, Scott says as he starts to back up. But Barda reaches down and grabs him by the cape and lifts him up into the air, and she glares at him. It looks like you were trying to sneak off on some adventure because your f***ing brother showed up out of nowhere and talked you into doing something stupid, Barda says, pointing out that leaving his wife and child behind would be very stupid. Liv giggles. Tell me that's not what's happening here, Barda growls. Scott holds up his hands in defeat, quickly explaining about the child that Orion has been ordered to kill, and how he wants Scott to protect it. This child, he might be a god, like us, Scott says. Barda nods as she puts him down, questioning how they're supposed to find one child in the world. Oberon probably knows what this is about, Scott suggests. Barda nods again and pushes past him, walking out the door. Scott turns to follow her, surprised that his wife isn't angry, but a diaper bag hits him hard enough in the face to stagger him. You're on diaper duty forever, Barda calls out. Meanwhile, in India, Kiran steps into the small room the family has rented. He looks to Mira, who is sitting by their son's bed. The small boy has been feverish and unconscious since he saved them in the jungle, when he showed his true power and stopped the soldiers. Kiran thinks back to when he found his son on the steps of the temple, a lost baby, alone and abandoned, how they raised him and would do anything to keep him safe. But the small family doesn't know that Maxwell Lord is watching the building on his satellites and ordering a recovery team of mercenaries to move in. You're not gonna tell them? This child probably channeled the source into an energy so powerful that he vaporized your whole team like it was a reflex, Seraphin notes from behind him. The new god leans back on his chair. Lord shrugs and takes a seat at the table. He waves away the idea as he lights a cigar. Seraphim smiles and points out that the humans need to worry more about being squashed by things they don't understand. But Lord shakes his head, explaining that he had recently been in a coma for several months, that he had finally woken with purpose and drive. As if acquiring this child was a thing that needed doing, and only by my hand would it be done, Lord tells him, explaining that he decided to watch the security cameras moments before he awoke. He watched as a glowing figure appeared in his room and reached out, touching him on the forehead. Lord smiles and pushes aside his hair, showing the Omega mark that was burned into his skin. You see, Seraphim, I am renewed with divine purpose, Lord tells him. Seraphim stares at the mark. Metron, he whispers. Meanwhile, the god of knowledge has arrived on Apocalypse. There, he finds the planet in chaos, as, without Darkseid, the various factions have begun to fight amongst themselves. Metron stands with Desaad, looking out over the fiery world. Earth has laid a child of the Source, a new god of unspoken power who awakens now, Metron said softly. Desaad turns to him in surprise. Darkseid is? Desaad whispers. Metron does not answer this question, merely explaining that the Highfather has already ordered the child's death. Desaad turns away, shouting that he will muster Granny Goodness and her Furies, that he must hold Apocalypse for Darkseid's return. But Metron shakes his head. Apocalypse is doomed. The end comes with an eclipse, the devouring of the last light of the gods, Metron says. For he is not looking at the planet now, but instead up in the sky, where the sun has been eclipsed by a vast mechanical world. On board, Karac looks down on Apocalypse below him, his army gathered at his back. Send forth the first kin. Let the fall of Apocalypse begin, he orders with a sneer. The alien armies descend upon Apocalypse, meeting the various factions of the Dark Planet in open warfare. Meanwhile, Metron has been called forth by the Chronicler, an ancient alien intelligence that watches as the story of the universe unfolds. Why have you called me here? Why now? Metron questions. The Chronicler smiles at him. But the system has begun to decay. My eyes can see far, the Chronicler informs him. The god of knowledge turns, pointing out that even the Chronicler cannot know how it will all end, not with certainty. The Chronicler nods and smiles. Would it matter if I did? My task is to record, to write, so that all may be remembered, he says. Turning away, the alien intelligence stares out at the star, perhaps watching as worlds are born and die. Perhaps I grow sentimental. Perhaps that is why I called you here. Will you listen, Metron, so that I may tell you how this all began? The Chronicler finally asks. And so the tale begins. The second world neared its end, and the Urgrund had fallen. The universe was a dark place, full of turmoil. Whole worlds were filled with wanderers and refugees. There were 3 god siblings who were fleeing the inevitable, those named Arbor Strutta, Parzarim, and Niktar. Arbor Strutta was the god of nomads and drifters, and had begun to gather followers in these end times. They gathered and followed in her shadow as she wandered. Niktar was the god of the unknown, the frontiers, and his followers sought new worlds and unfound lands. Parzarim was the god of invention and industry, he who knew the inner workings of things and how to create. He was worshipped by the toilers and the smiths. It was he who created the wandering planet known as Zurum-Uon, before it fell to darker ends and became the mechanical planet known as Machinotrum. But the siblings' downfall began when Niktar took his followers to the edges of known space, far from the light of the source. There, they discovered a living blackness that was driven by an intelligence unlike any they had ever seen. Niktar and his people were overcome by this parasitic darkness and returned to make war upon his siblings. He killed his sister Arbor Strudda and ate her flesh. He took the name of Niktari and proclaimed himself the god of scavengers. They captured Parzurum and punished him, for the middle child would not create for his evil brother, refusing to build machines of war and conquest. So, Parzurum was imprisoned, his hands bound forever. But Parzurum escaped. He fractured his mind into two parts, Mater and Pater, and sent them out into the universe. Mater would be caught in the gravity of Urgrund at its sundering, while Pater drifted through the vast eternity until it came to an infant planet at the corner of the cosmos. It lay there for a brief age until it was discovered by the intelligent life that began to image. Early man discovered this strange craft and was afraid of it, but Pater took the form of the humans and walked among them. He took the name Pitamaha and taught them tools and implements, taught them to create fire. He lived among them throughout the ages, taking on various names and deities. They worshipped him for a time and loved him as one of their own. Pater loved them and feared their weaknesses and short lives. It was during the time of the pharaohs that Pater looked at the kingdom. He feared that Niktari would find this place, that he wouldn't be there to protect them. And so, Pater created once more, as he had so long ago. He created a weapon, one capable of growing, adapting, and evolving to do all that would be asked of it. He took the strange metal which writhed in his hands and placed it inside a child. He powered this weapon with his final breath, tethering it to the source. This new god was placed into a temple so that it would rise up when the people needed it most. Eventually, the child was awakened and found on the steps of the temple by an unknown archaeologist, a man who took the child and raised it as if it was his own. The chronicler finishes his tale and looks back to Metron. And now, after an age, the rest of the tale shall be written, the chronicler whispers, for this could be the beginning of the end. Meanwhile, Scott and Barda have arrived at the home of Oberon in Las Vegas, where the new god scientist shows them a powerful machine that he has created that can bring them to a source signature.
How much do you want to bet that the signature that lit up my screens a few nights ago belongs to this kid you're looking for?
Oberon asks with a smile, but Barda just glares at him. Tell me you're not thinking of going with us, she asks as the man begins to power up the machine, but the old man just smiles and winks.
You two geniuses don't think you're going to need someone to take care of you when things get hairy?
He asks. Meanwhile, Apocalypse has fallen. Karac stands victorious on the steps of Darkseid's former palace. He looks around at all that lays before him.
There were others here, leading Apocalypse in Darkseid's stead. I want them found before we leave. We take New Genesis next, he growls.
Back on Earth, Kiran and Mira are fleeing with their son in a car. Behind them, the mercenaries are hot on their trail. One sticks an RPG out the window and takes careful aim and fires.
but the rocket suddenly veers out of the way as scot-free lands on the roof of the family's taxi. The mercenaries look on in shock, but Scott merely smiles. "You guys are in so much trouble," he jokes. Suddenly, Barda lands in front of the mercenary Humvee, slamming into it hard and stopping them dead in their tracks. The battle for the child has begun. The distant past. The High Father smiles. He holds his shepherd's crook as he stares out over his new world. "A new Genesis," he whispers. He turns to his friend Hyman, asking the other cosmic being what he thinks of the new planet. "It is a good name for the promise you bring to this place, Isaiah, old friend," Hyman tells him. High Father nods, explaining that he has long felt worn out and tired, spent from the centuries of war. But now, he has traded his weapons for a shepherd's crook, and he can build something, lead his people. He motions to another god, Atenai, the goddess of structures. She floats over the fields, willing High Father's vision into existence with her magic. "We will call it Sir Tuin. It will be a place of blossoming hope, the finest garden to be fit for a god," High Father explains. He looks to his friend, reminding him that their new world needs a beating heart. But Hyman shakes his head. "I have told you before, it is not ready. I do not understand it yet," Hyman says, reminding High Father that he found the strange element in the ruins of Galactica that was. The gods searched through the rubble and found the strange element and pulled it from the earth, discovered it encased in a protective core. Hyman reaches into his robes and pulls out the device, allowing it to gently float above his hand. High Father looks at the cube as it gently shifts and reproportions itself. "I have made a thinking device with it, a mother box," Hyman says. He holds the box in front of him, explaining that it is trying to envision High Father's dream, to see its true potential. "See, Hyman, she desires to be part of my vision," High Father says. He asks him to build him a larger mother box and place it at the center of his city as its heart, promising that he will defend it, that he is the High Father, and he will not let it fall. But now, explosions rip through Sir Tuin. The forces of the Machinotrum have broken through the atmosphere. Blaster cannons thunder from their ships, ripping through the city. The High Father stands in his tower and watches as the invading force floats overhead. He is flanked by Lightray and Ra Hao, who inform their leader of the city's defense against the invaders. Vizvac is already reconfiguring the defenses. Akala is helping set up the ground forces, and Shadowfall is at the northern edge. She will hold them off, the gods report. But the High Father is silent. He stares at the armies as they approach, until he finally turns away and stalks towards the inner chambers. "I want a barrier around the mother box at the heart of the city, and tell Shadowfall I am counting on her," High Father calls out. Meanwhile, on the northern edge of the city, the first troop ships have landed. The bay doors have opened, and the vile horde of the Machinotrum begins to thunder outward. But some stop short, staring in fascination at the lone warrior that stands to meet them. Shadowfall holds out her hand, allowing her bow to craft itself around her. She reaches into the sky, speaking words of magic to call forth her arrows and aim her bow. "Sleep well, my sweets. At Shadow's fall," she whispers. The sky suddenly alights with hundreds of glowing arrows. They rain down from the sky and pierce the horde, bringing screams of pain and death before the field becomes silent.
Meanwhile, on Earth, Oberon smiles as he and Liv watch Big Barda toss the mercenaries' Humvee away. The men have been spilled to the earth and attempt to fight back, but Barda grabs one and tosses him aside. "Enough! I don't want to hurt you any more than I have to," she snarls. But one grabs a rifle and opens fire. Barda cocks an eyebrow at him as the rounds bounce off her shoulder. "Or maybe I do," she growls. Oberon laughs as the man screams in pain. Nearby, Scott has managed to get the taxi to stop, and the family has stepped out. Now, he kneels before the young boy, the new god at the center of this prophecy. "Hey there, kiddo. You don't have to be afraid," he says with a reassuring smile. "My name is Scott Free. I'm Mr. Miracle. I'm here to keep you safe," he says. The boy begins to step forward, but suddenly, the air is alive with the crackle of energy. Barda and Oberon feel it as well and shout for Scott, but it is too late. A portal opens with a mighty boom, and Scott turns to see Orion step forward. "Oh no, his 7 days are up," Barda whispers. Orion steps forward and brandishes his weapon.
It was my folly to think that this was even possible. Look at the fool who thought to question his father's judgment. 7 days, Scott. Look at all that has happened in that time. New Genesis is at war,
Orion growls. Back on New Genesis, Shadowfall stands before a second wave. Her arrows once again cut through the horde with no effort. The ships overhead have begun to fall as a light ray flies amongst them, using his power to cut them out of the sky. Meanwhile, Highfather now stands before the mother box at the center of the city. He looks to Ra-How with sadness as he lays aside his shepherd's crook.
For long ages I've kept my little dream alive, but I have grown older, and so has New Genesis. Perhaps it was naive of me to believe that such a fragile dream would need no protection. Or perhaps I was only a fool for holding on to the dream of being a peaceful god, Highfather says, as he pulls aside his robes and walks up the steps to the mother box.
"Highfather, where are you going?" Ra-How asks.
"Sometimes, Ra, to save one dream, you have to kill another,"
Highfather calls over his shoulder before stepping inside the mother box and being bathed in light. He promises to unleash the new gods, to give them full access to the source, which he has denied them all these years. Meanwhile, Karac has ordered his forces to abandon the landing sites and simply land anywhere in the city that they can. The ships suddenly veer off course. Shadowfall tries her hardest, but even her powers aren't strong enough to take down all of the ships. And in moments, the Horde has arrived in Surtuin. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Scott holds up a hand to stop Orion, but the warrior does not listen. He leaps forward and brings his weapon down, but the hero and child are suddenly gone, and the powerful weapon merely cracks the concrete where they once stood. "Listen to me, Orion. This child is not to blame for the war on New Genesis. If you hurt him now, how are you any different from your father?" Scott demands. Orion whirls on him in anger. "You dare!" But Barda's fist slams into his mouth and knocks him into the forest that surrounds them, cracking trees and boulders in his path. "Less talking, hun. More fighting," Barda growls to her husband. But suddenly, things change. Scott can feel it. A surge of energy, and the young boy's eyes suddenly begin to glow. Back on New Genesis, the Highfather steps from the mother box, now clad in armor, no longer a shepherd, but a warrior. He stands ready. "Light Ray, Akala, clear the field," Highfather orders. It was long ago that a young light ray stood beside the Highfather as another god was laid to rest. "Highfather, what happens when we die?" Light Ray asked quietly. The kindly Highfather kneeled before him and said simply, "We return to the source, my child, from whence we came." Later, Light Ray was sent to aid Metron to watch as a world met its extinction. There, Light Ray saw the end of life on a world, in the hopes that he would learn of the transformation of death. Still later, Light Ray watched another god put to rest, but this time he was kept company by the Black Racer, the physical manifestation of death for the new gods. "I have watched you for long ages. What lies at the end? What awaits us?" Light Ray asked the Racer. The Black Racer smiles. "I will tell you the answer one day, but you have to earn it," he says. And so, the Black Racer proposes a contest that each time the two gods meet, they will race against one another. "And the day I catch you, young Solus, that day you will have your answer," the Black Racer tells him. Now, Light Ray flies up and grabs a hold of another Niktari ship, using his energy to destroy it. He turns to find another target, but a new order stops him. "Light Ray, Akala, clear the field," he hears Highfather order as he steps from the mother box at the heart of the city, energy pulsing off of him and sweeping through the city. Light Ray returns to the central control tower to oversee the evacuation of the city, but he is greeted by Metron. "Light Ray, a word, if you will," the god of knowledge calls. Meanwhile, Highfather meets Karac on the field of battle. "So this is the power of a god, Isaiah the Inheritor," Karac calls as he steps forward, the horde at his back. "The Alpha effect, yes, the spark of creation. With it, I can change the very nature of matter. I have not used it yet, merely unsheathed it," Highfather says with a nod. He looks at the invaders and calmly asks Karac to leave, but the warrior shakes his head and removes his mask. "I have seen it before, when Darkseid laid waste to my world. He too thought himself a god. Look at where he is now," Karac says softly as he lifts his blade and motions to the horde behind him. "We are Niktari, the Nightborn. We are the ones who tend to the dark when the gods are all gone. Your time has come," Karac growls. "I will give you and all of the new Genesis the same choice that was given to me once. Convert or be conquered," Karac orders. But the Highfather raises his staff and meets the blade of the sword with his power. The energy washes over Karac and those around him, ripping them apart until there is nothing left but a skeleton. The Highfather stares at them sadly before turning away, but a voice calls out. He turns back and stares in shock as Karac and his warriors begin to heal, their flesh regrowing on their bones. "When my world was left in ruins, I too began a journey to seek the means of salvation. At the end of my search, I found darkness. Your power holds no sway over me. The time of the gods has ended," Karac growls. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Orion leaps for another attack, but Scott once again dodges out of the way. "Damn it, Orion! Listen to me! I'm doing what you asked me to do!" Scott shouts, but Barda isn't interested in talking and slams her knee into Orion's stomach. She grabs him by the arm and prepares to strike him again, but Orion twists and punches her away. The warrior turns back to Scott and the child, but Kamal has started to glow. "Stop him!" Orion orders, but suddenly, a blast of energy shoots from Kamal's chest and slams into Orion, knocking him through the trees. "Kamal, no!" Kamal's mother screams. Everyone stares at the crater where Orion landed, but the warrior is laughing as he stands up. "Ha ha ha ha! I knew there was a reason Highfather sent me after him. A threat worthy of my talents, Scott. It's been so long since I fought without holding back," Orion calls. Back on New Genesis, Karac swings his blade and laughs as Highfather leaps over the attack. "Isaiah, you sent away your gods, utterly convinced of your own victory. Where are they now?" Karac gloats, but the Highfather hits him with another blast that tears off half his face. But once more, the Niktari warrior heals quickly. He whirls again and slashes at Highfather across the chest. "My darkness cuts deep, and it is pure," Karac growls. Highfather staggers for a moment before falling to his knees. But Karac doesn't press his attack, and neither does the Horde. The warrior merely stands tall and motions to the Nightborn ships overhead. Darkness begins to pour out of them and fall over the city. "Your gods will watch as we strip this place from within. Take from it what is of use and leave its dying husk to crumble," Karac growls. He motions behind him as a cloaked figure steps through the crowd of warriors. "I will leave behind a steward here to oversee the ransacking of New Genesis," Karac says. The figure removes his hood to reveal the face of Darkseid's son, now transformed into a Niktari. The Highfather stares at him in shock. "Graven, your father," he gasps, but Graven lashes out with the Omega Beams. The energy snakes through the air and prepares to strike Highfather in the chest. But there is a flash of light, and Light Ray steps in the way, meeting the beams with his own energy. The Highfather is pulled to safety, but he shouts for Solus. "No, we can't leave him on his own. I wish to help him," he cries, but Metron is there. "Highfather, Light Ray knows of his fate. I made sure to tell him, and he accepted willingly," the God of Knowledge says as they continue to watch the fight. Light Ray continues to fight as the other gods escape back to the control tower, but Karac has had enough. He steps in with his mighty sword and stabs the god through the chest. Solus stares in shock for a moment before sagging on the piece of dark metal as he is lifted into the air. Back at the control tower, Metron leads Highfather to the other gods. "We go to Earth, Highfather. The prophecy, the steed of fate. Perhaps this is what the source is trying to tell us," Metron says softly. But the Highfather merely looks in sadness. "The prophecy? Oh no. Orion," he whispers. Back on Earth, Scott and Barda stand ready, shielding Kamal and his family. Scott stares at his brother as Orion prepares to attack again. "You knew what you were doing when you came to me, Orion. I choose now to trust the brother who asked me to save this child from him. The only way you're getting to him is through me," Scott calls out. Orion nods and grits his teeth. He has never disobeyed the Highfather.
If that kid is going to survive this, he's going to need a miracle. Orion shouts before rushing forward, his fist coming in for a finishing blow. But there is a blur of motion and the attack is stopped with a mighty boom. Orion looks up in surprise at the man who stopped his attack. Superman has arrived. Light Ray blasted his way through the hordes of Niktari. Lashing out with his powers, he whirls back for another pass, only to be stopped suddenly as a sharp metal pierces his chest. He gasps as he looks down at Karac. "Father!" Solus gasps before his body sags. But the hero knew the sacrifice that was asked of him, knew what it would cost him, and knew the time it would buy the others. Now, the other gods stand around Highfather. Metron looks up into the sky and sees the Niktari warships block their path. Highfather, the way to Earth is closed. You must pry the skies open for those of us still alive, Metron tells their leader. Akala steps outside onto the balcony, promising to buy them time. He holds up his hands, calling forth a powerful force field as the Niktari warships bear down on them. Akala speaks the language of the source. "Here, I command, shall be a door," he bellows. The Niktari slam against the force field, allowing the new god's ship to quickly exit. On board, Highfather is wounded, but still raises his hands, using his powers to call forth a boom tube that allows the gods to jump away from the fallen New Genesis. But someone has stayed behind. Below on the battlefield, the Black Racer stalks. He reaches down for the lost source of energy that was once Solus. "This day, Solus, though I'd hoped the chase would last forever, this day you will have your answer," the Black Racer says softly as he opens a portal that will lead them to the source. He thinks back on that day, long ago, when he met the hero Light Ray. "Tell me, Racer, do you know what happens when one of us dies?" Light Ray had asked him. And so, the Black Racer steps through the portal. His existence stretches as he leads Solus to the source, to the afterlife of the new gods. For that is his task as death. And in this plane of existence, Solus can speak with him. I am dead? I was winning, wasn't I? I saved Highfather. I was going to save Sir Tuin. You have to take me back. They'll need me. They'll need my help, Solus begs him. But the Black Racer shakes his head as they move through the light and spectrum of existence. "That is not for me to decide, Solus. The light at the end of the tunnel, the source. Though it happens rarely, the source could send you back," Black Racer explains. They continue through this strange spectrum of existence, the walls around them pulsing, as the Racer explains that the concerns of the living world are no longer Light Ray's concern. But there are many perils between the world of the living and the end of the journey. Unborn and unliving concepts roam these currents, ready to devour some of the essence of the real so that they can break through into the world outside, the Black Racer explains. He motions to the darkness that begins to seep around them. "Though it is forbidden by the first covenant, the darkness's will and desire is always bent upon this place. We are surrounded by it," the Black Racer says, explaining that the darkness always seeks to devour the essence of the living. "That which cannot return to the source is lost forever. But here in the Waiternum, it cannot interfere. It cannot cross the Racer says. But the darkness suddenly reaches out for him, black tendrils wrapping around his arms and pulling him down. "No, this is not possible. This is not your domain," the Black Racer begins to say before being swallowed by the darkness.
Meanwhile, Highfather awakens on the New God's ship as it hurtles through the darkness of space. He looks up to see Shadowfall sitting by his bedside. "You did it. We're approaching Earth, but the passage was not kind to the ship. But Ra-How thinks we'll make it," she tells him. Highfather nods as he tries to sit up. "Where is Solus?" he asks. The tears that fall from Shadowfall's eyes are her only answer. Highfather sighs and closes his eyes. "He was always a sweet boy, you know, an eager child, but strangely ungifted, born without the powers of a god," Highfather whispers. He thinks back on the past, when Orion and Solus were children and friends. One day, they stumbled on a nest of apocalyptian soldiers that had hidden themselves on New Genesis. Orion fought valiantly, but Solus was injured in the battle as he had been born without powers. Highfather could do nothing for the boy, and so it was believed that he would not survive. Orion sat by his friend's bedside the whole time, learning that there is always hope, and Solus did not die. His body was reborn as that of Lightray, with all the powers of the New Gods. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the Waiternum, Solus has still not given up hope. The Black Racer has been swallowed by the darkness, which saps all life and thought of hope. "Racer, do you hear me? This cannot be the end. Not like this. I am the light, and I refuse to dwindle," Solus's essence calls out. The Black Racer reaches out for the small amount of the source. "Now get up! Our race is not yet done," Solus commands. The Black Racer pushes against the darkness, fighting his way free. "You dare tread upon my work here?" he calls as he reaches out. His scythe appears in his hand. "Very well. If you wish to roam this place, then you too must play by its rules. You stand now in the precipice world, where non-living things may taste of life, but all that lives can be made death," the Black Racer hisses. He slashes at the darkness and clears himself a path. Now, he races forward, passing through the spectrum of existence until he finally reaches the source. And there, he hands over the essence of Solus. With his task complete, the Black Racer leans towards the ancient box. "If you can hear me at all, if there is any way to bring him back, you should. Because if you won't do something about it, I will," the Racer whispers. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Orion flares up at Superman. The Man of Steel cocks an eyebrow at him and looks down at the fist he just caught. "I've taken a hit, full throttle, from you before, and that wasn't it. So I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume you really weren't intending to kill a child," Superman says. But he motions up to the sky, where a New Genesis ship has just broken the atmosphere. "Now, why don't you stand down, and we can all go find out just what in the heck is falling out of the sky," Superman continues. The New Gods look to their communications and realize that they are survivors of New Genesis. "They need help," Mr. Miracle tells Superman. The Man of Steel smiles and nods. "I know, we've got it covered," he promises. Above them, the Justice League is already at work to slow the ship's descent. On the ground, Diana and the Amazons are preparing to soften the landing, and Green Arrow is ready to shoot debris out of the sky with anti-grav arrows. "She's all yours to catch, Blue," Green Arrow says. Superman nods his head and leaps up into the sky. And that was the full story for the first volume of Ram V's The New Gods, with issues 1 through 6, the first half of his 12-issue saga. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see what happens next, I'll link that video in the description. And, of course, like and subscribe for more full stories every week. I'm Dan with Comicstorian, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.